Alrighty, hi there, ladies and gentlemen. It is a beautiful Sunday, April 24th afternoon, and we got the big stream that I've been talking about. I know that I've been uh, leaving you guys high and dry the past couple days, even though nobody watches these streams. And yeah, I think we'll do like a 3 or 4 hour stream today. And I have, if you haven't noticed, improved the stream. I've made it finally. This is the first watchable episode of the Relatively Civil Discourse Live Political Philosophy Convoy because I've added noise suppression to this microphone. I added it to one other video because after my parliamentary react video, which you could also watch, it's linked down below. But the wind noise from outside my apartment was horrific, so I decided to put it in for part one of my platform. The only issue is that it makes the audio at the edges, like whenever I redline it, quite tinny. But the clicking for me steering the truck makes the stream a lot more difficult to watch. So I think you guys are going to like the compromise that I made. Alrighty. And also today we're starting, actually, this political philosophy lecture with Plato's Apology, which is what I started my study of political philosophy with, at least like when I took the course. I'd say, what would I say is the first book that I read that had political philosophy in it? Maybe the second treatise, but I don't think that's right. I guess that's going to be my answer, the second treatise of government. Maybe that's why I'm a libertarian. Oh, I forgot my water bottle. I normally bring everything with me. I think I'll be right back. Sorry, guys. And sorry for people actually that I'm recording this with. Perfect. That did work, right? All right, perfect. Yeah, I've always been looking for an opportunity to use that. I made that. I hope you enjoyed it right there. All right, let's get into the show. Let's get into the lecture. And yeah, I got my water. If you're gonna be drinking coffee, which I am this fine morning, although it's gonna be the afternoon in 4 minutes, then you should have some coffee. Let's take a quick job. Price per distance. Yeah, we sold that $9,000 one, I think. All right, let's rock and roll. We got a stream in the top right. You got me in the top left. Audio's working. I turned on everything. We got this. Are we in Istanbul? No, that was just loading Istanbul. We're in a Volvo. Are we in a Globetrotter? We're in an FH16. Okay, we got it shipped up. And we are driving a double-decker, as I like to say. Okay, this is going to be pretty hard to do. Take a left out of here, but we will persevere. It's not going to happen, is it? Come on. It's close. We did it. Alright, perfect. Alright, yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. I hope you're having a great day. And yeah, we're going to be starting the apology once we get on the road. I think do we? Can't tell. It doesn't look very green to me. Oh, I can look. There we go. Can't even see our signal light. Okay, we can go. Perfect. And yeah, I bet you can't hear that clicking anymore. So yeah, finally, the first watchable episode of this show. Yellow. Look at the friendly people of... where are we? Amsterdam? Yep. The towns in this game are so small. Maybe we should be playing American Truck Simulator. I don't know. What do you really want out of a truck simulation game? No. Like, I'm not really an enthusiast. I'm just here for the political content. And in fact, I want to, like I said, the introduction to the series, although I'm not sure if I said it yesterday. Yeah, this is like the 98th most popular game on Twitch. If I want to talk about it, like me, I probably should stream the game. Oh my gosh, we're running this. Okay, sweet, we didn't get caught. I don't have the tolerance for 2 in a row. Okay, let's stop. Perfect. Time is money. Perfect. I could have started the lecture, honestly. But, also, we gotta have a little bit of a pre-drag chat.
Today we start. Guess what? We start with Plato. Plato's Apology of Socrates. This is the best introductory text to the study of political philosophy. Why? Let me give you two reasons. First, it shows Socrates, the reputed founder of our discipline, the founder of political science, and I will say a little bit more about that later on today, explaining himself and justifying himself, justifying.
Oh, I should have brought my copy of the Apology in here because I want to read off to you guys. Oh, well.
His way of life before a jury of his peers.
Just in my living room.
It shows Socrates speaking in a public forum, defending the utility of philosophy for political life. And secondly, the Apology demonstrates also the vulnerability of political philosophy in its relation to the city, in its relation to political power. The Apology puts on trial not merely a particular individual, Socrates, but puts on trial the very idea of philosophy.
Yep.
From its very beginnings, philosophy and the city, philosophy and political life have stood in a sort of tension with one another. Socrates is charged, as we will see, by the city for corrupting the youth in impiety toward the gods, right? In other words,
To death, by the way. That's the penalty for corrupting the youth and not respecting the gods of Athens. Yeah, this is one of, I don't know, I've been thinking about whether or not I should title the essay I'd like to write about this speech the most interesting speech in history, because this is one of the most interesting speeches in history. Is that a cop?
he's accused of treason, a high capital offense. No other work of which I am aware helps us better think through the conflict, I would even say the necessary and inevitable conflict between the freedom of the mind and the requirements of political life. Are these two things, are these two goods, as it were, freedom of mind and political life, are they compatible, or are they necessarily at odds with one another? That seems to me to be, in some ways, the fundamental question that the Apology asks us to consider.
Just press C. That's awesome.
Okay?
You can relax.
Now, for generations, the Apology has stood out as a symbol for the violation of free expression. It sets the case for the individual committed to the examined life over and against a bigoted and prejudiced multitude. The clearest statement of this view of...
If this isn't the most interesting speech in history, it definitely comes from one of history's most interesting men.
Again, the individual...
Socrates, what makes him so interesting is that he tried to live his crazy life so honestly, like Diogenes.
That against the mob in some ways is found in a very...
We'll see what he's talking about. But when I first learned about this, when I first attended the lecture on the Apology, it was a 3-hour lecture, and yeah, you can actually spend 3 hours talking about this course. So I'm talking about this speech. I wonder how he's going to try and tackle it in 45 minutes.
In a work...
And also I wonder what I can add to it.
Of a very famous civil libertarian of the 19th century, a man named John Stuart Mill. In his famous tract called simply On Liberty, Mill wrote, "Mankind can hardly be too often reminded that there was once a man named Socrates, between whom and the legal authorities of his time there took place a memorable collision." Over and again, and Mill is kind of a famous case of this, over and again Socrates has been described as a martyr for freedom of speech, and he has been somewhat extravagantly compared at various times to Jesus, to Galileo, to Sir Thomas More, and has been used as a role model for thinkers and political activists from Henry David Thoreau to Gandhi to Martin Luther King. So Socrates has become a very central, you might say, symbol of political resistance and resistance to political power, and of the dangers to the individual of sort of unchecked rule.
Oh, I'm going to change the stream title really quick. Let's go with Apologies, Socrates. Not the introduction anymore. Okay, done. And get back into it. Thanks for your patience.
But this reading of the Apology, as you might say, a kind of brief for freedom of expression, and a warning against the dangers of censorship and persecution. Although this has been enormously influential over the centuries, at least over the last century and a half, you have to ask yourself, is this the reading that Plato intended? Did Plato want us to read the dialogue this way? As a teacher of mine used to say, you read Plato your way, I'll read him his way. But how did Plato intend this dialogue to be understood? Note that Socrates never defends himself by reference to the doctrine of unlimited free speech. He doesn't make that claim. He doesn't make the claim about the general utility of freedom or unlimited speech. Rather, he maintains, as he puts it near the end of the dialogue, or the end of the defense speech, that the examined life is alone worth living. Only those, in other words, engaged in the continual struggle to clarify their thinking, to remove sources of contradiction and incoherence, only those people can be said to live worthwhile lives. The unexamined life is not worth living, Socrates confidently, defiantly, you might say, asserts to his listeners, to his audience. Nothing else matters for him. His, in other words, seems to be a highly personal, in many ways highly individual quest for self-perfection, and not a doctrine about the value of freedom of speech in general. But even though, you might say, Socrates seems to be engaged in, again, this highly personal quest for self-perfection, there is something which one can't avoid deeply political about the Apology and about his teaching. At the heart of the dialogue, or at the heart of this speech, rather, is a quarrel with his accusers over the question, never stated directly perhaps, but over the question of who has the right to educate future citizens and statesmen of the city of Athens. Socrates' defense speech, like every Platonic dialogue, is ultimately a dialogue about education. Who has the right to teach? Who has the right to educate? This is, in many ways, for Socrates, the fundamental political question of all times. It is the question of, really, who governs? Or maybe put another way, who should govern? Who ought to govern? Remember also that the city that brought Socrates to trial was not just any city. It was a peculiar kind of city. It was Athens. And Athens was, until only fairly recent times in human history, the most famous democracy that ever existed. I say fairly recent times until, the American democracy, but it was until at least the 18th or 19th century, the most famous democracy that ever existed. The speech of Socrates before the jury is perhaps the most famous attempt to put democracy itself on trial. It is not merely Socrates who is on trial. Socrates intends to put the democracy of Athens itself on trial. Not only does the Apology to force Socrates to defend himself before the city of Athens, but Socrates puts the city of Athens on trial and makes it defend itself before the high court of philosophy.
that is what is so crazy interesting about this speech, is the audacity of Socrates to submit himself to this trial, to challenge the people of Athens, to give this ridiculous way. It's so funny that he says that, like, I'm not committing a crime, I'm just living my life, and I'm not going to stop living my life this way, and I should be punished. I should, in fact, be rewarded for living my life this way.
So the ensuing debate.
The consistency, although he's a little bit inconsistent at the beginning of the speech. Like, for example, I'm not sure how he doing this guy's going to get, but he says the speech isn't going to be rehearsed. It's just going to be, like, impromptu, off the cuff, and it so clearly is, and it's insanely well prepared. It also has, like, Greek puns and jokes all littered throughout it if you look at the footnotes. That's one of the ways it's not very consistent. He's clearly up to something. He's quite tricky in the speech.
Within the dialogue can be read as a struggle, again, over who has title to rule. Is it the people? Is it the court of Athens, the demos, to use the Greek word for the people? Or is it Socrates, the philosopher king, who should be vested with ultimate political authority? That is, of course, the question that's taken up in a very vivid way, much more explicit way, in the Republic. But it runs throughout the Apology, and you can't really understand the Apology unless you see that that is the question that Socrates is posing throughout. Yeah, yes?
Yeah, he can.
Okay.
That's how it goes.
So, I had some names put on the board and some dates, just because I want to talk a little bit about the political context of this dialogue. One can, of course, read, there's nothing wrong with reading the Apology, again, as a kind of enduring symbol of the plight of the, you might say, the just individual confronted with an unjust mob or an unjust political rule. It's again a question that Plato takes up in the Apology, when in the Republic, when a character in the book named Glaucon, who happens to be, as it were, the brother of Plato, asks Socrates if it is actually better to be just or simply to have the reputation for justice. And Socrates says it is better to be just, even if that results in persecution and death. But the trial is not, again, just an enduring symbol of justice versus injustice. It is an actual historical event that takes place in a particular moment of political time.
This speech really happened, by the way. Like, this might sound crazy to you because, like, it's not something we talk about, but it's kind of actually been up for debate for a while whether or not Socrates is a person who actually lived and not a fictional character that represents the people of Athens. Like an interesting guy. Are you backing up or am I going forward? Oh, I pressed back. Really close. Oh, really close, yeah. Oh, sorry about that. This guy's so slow. But yeah, we know the speech really happened. Xenophon and Plato both recorded it. They have very slightly different versions of it.
And this bears, I think, decisively on how we come to understand the case both for and against Socrates. Let me talk a little bit about that context. The trial of Socrates takes place in the year 399, and all of these refer to
BC.
No, before the Common Era, 399. Some of you will know that trial follows very quickly upon the heels of the famous Peloponnesian War.
Socrates is a veteran.
This was the war,
by the way.
Related.
It's funny, man. All these people are veterans. You should think about it that way. Like, it's something ridiculous. I can't remember. It's either 50 or 75% of the Athenian population was on the military. The male population were on the military conscription rolls. They ever needed to fight. They were always ready to throw down, even though they're not famous for it.
by Socrates'
They also won
slightly
the Peloponnesian
older
Wars.
contemporary, a man named Thucydides, who wrote the history of the Peloponnesian War, the war that took place between the two great powers of
I haven't read that book, but I'm dying to someday.
the Greek world, between the Spartans and their allies, and Athens and its allies. The Athens that fought this war against Sparta was an Athens at the height of its political power and prestige, under the leadership of its first citizen.
Just can stick the landing, eh? Break up. More. Oh, shit. Come on. Okay. Perfect. We did it. I don't want to park this stupid trailer. It's going to be super difficult, I think. Where do you want it? No, I can't even do that. I'll try. I can't even do this, though. There's like no way. There's like no shot. Just gonna have to like edge it in. But like, yeah, the trailer's so long that there's no way. Oh, sweet, we got it. Awesome. Mission accomplished. Excellent. 3% damage. That's a shame, though. Get that XP. Oh, 5. Alrighty. Good job. Hit it again. Time to kill 6,009. Yeah, this is more. It's a shame that you have to go distance per kilometer. Like the highest paying jobs also can't be the highest distance per kilometer. Ooh, this is we're in another Scania, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, this one looks a little bit worse. Start a rep. And looks like we're just gonna be right on the road right away. We are carrying another dual trailer. This one's fun. Nah, I think Scania trucks are faster. I think they have higher acceleration, I think. Prepare for the stop sign. Nice. Alright, let's hit it.
Citizen Pericles, whose name is also up there at the very top. Under Pericles, Athens had built the famous Acropolis. It had established Athens as a mighty and redoubtable naval power, and it created an unprecedented level of artistic and cultural life, even today known simply as Periclean Athens. But Athens was also something completely unprecedented in the world. It was a democracy. And again, even today, the expression Athenian democracy connotes an ideal of the most complete form of democratic government that has ever existed. We are the school of Hellas. This is what Pericles boasts to his listeners in the famous funeral oration told by Thucydides. We throw our city open to the world and never exclude foreigners from any opportunity of learning and observing, even though the eyes of an enemy may profit from our liberality.
Yep, make way, make way.
Pericles boasts once again. The question maybe you want to ask about this is, how could the world's first, freest, and most open society sentence to death a man who spoke freely about his own ignorance and professed to care for nothing so much as virtue and human excellence?
Because he annoyed the ever-living shit out of them. To answer your question. Oh, you fucking prick! What the? Why? Why? It was green, dude. Who are you stopping for? What were you? Are you just stuck here now? Are we just both stuck here? What a fucking wise guy. I hear ya. I hear ya. Do you have a backup cam? What am I supposed to do? This guy, he's paralyzed by fear. Oh, I see. He recovered his wits. What the hell? That guy should be paying me. I can't remember what we were talking about. Oh yeah, that's how the Athenians killed Socrates. He annoyed the ever-living crap out of him. But yeah, it's amazing that Athens existed. My view of humanity and my view of political science would be dimmer and much more boring and sad if I didn't know that these crazy bastards actually managed to have a direct democracy with over 10,000 participants. Like 10,000 voting participants, not 10,000 citizens. Well, sorry, like when I say citizens, I mean people who lived in the regular area, not people who actually had a Canadian citizenship, of which there were like, I don't know, I think at least 10,000 who were eligible to vote. It's crazy. The Athenian democracy and the Iroquois Confederacy, or Iroquois, sorry, Confederacy are the two most interesting direct democratic states, and like calling the Iroquois Confederacy a direct democratic state is a little bit of a stretch. It's much more accurate to call it a consensus government, but it is the second or first most interesting democratic experiment in history, next to Athenian democracy and the Iroquois Confederacy, along with the United Kingdom and the American Republic.
Now, at the
It blows my mind. How do they do it? How do they do it? 300 BC. 2,300 years ago, man.
Outbreak of the Peloponnesian War, Socrates was just under 40 years of age, and we learn from the speech that Socrates was himself served in the military and served in defense of his country. The war, the Peloponnesian War, was fought, as you can see, over considerable length of time, on and off for almost a period of 30 years, and was concluded in the year 404 with the defeat of Athens and the installing of a pro-Spartan.
Didn't I say that Athens won the Peloponnesian War like 2 seconds ago, or did I just think it to myself?
Oligarchy, a pro-Spartan regime known as simply as the 30 Tyrants, also up there, who ruled Athens for a year.
We cannot see what
The next year, 403, the tyrants, the 30 as they were called, were driven out, and a democratic government was once again reestablished in Athens. Just 3 years later, 3 men named Anytus, Meletus, and Lycos, all of whom had been part of the democratic resistance movement against the Spartan oligarchy. These men brought charges against Socrates. Their charges against him were corrupting the young and disbelieving in the gods that the city believes in. So you can see that the charges were brought by people who were themselves, again, part of a democratic resistance movement. And the names of Anytus and Meletus, as you've read, appear in the speech itself. So the charges brought against Socrates did not simply grow out of thin air. Maybe we should rephrase the question. Not why did the Athenians bring Socrates to trial, but why did they permit him to carry on his practice of challenging the law and the authority of the law for as long as they did?
Much better question.
Okay?
Now one I can answer.
Add to this
crassly.
the fact that when Socrates...
I think so. I mean, what he's about to say, or what Socrates is about to say, and what he's about to relate, is that Socrates considered what he was doing to be a public service, right? But it is a really good question as to why people put up with it for so long. He really annoyed the crap out of everybody.
He was brought to trial again. The democracy had only recently been reestablished, but that many friends and former students of Socrates had been themselves implicated in the rule of the hated 30 tyrants. Among the members of the 30 were a man named Critias. There's actually a Platonic dialogue named after him, a man named Critias, who was a relative of Plato's, and another man named Charmides, who was also named as the title of a Platonic dialogue, Charmides, who was Plato's uncle. Plato himself, he tells us much later in life in his famous 7th letter, Plato himself was invited by his relatives to help to form a part of the government of the 30. And later Plato said that so abhorrent did they become that they made the older democracy look like the golden age. So the point I'm suggesting is that many of Socrates' students and associates, including Plato himself, had some connection with this oligarchical government that had ruled Athens for a brief time. And Socrates...
By the way, yeah, I was about to mention this before. That's what you taught me to think about speaking of. Imagine fighting Athens for 30 years only to set up a crappy government that lasts less than 5. And think of all the blood and treasure that was sacrificed in the Peloponnesian Wars. Sparta never ever recovers. Athens, like maybe that's why I confused them. After the Peloponnesian Wars and after the Persian Wars, Greco-Persian Wars, Sparta's done, and Athens is pretty. I mean, I was about to say they're just getting started, but Athens will be the primary power on the Greek peninsula for centuries to come. Still,
he was himself not above suspicion. You often, don't we, even today, yes, we often judge teachers by their students, by the company they keep. Yes? Don't we? No one is above suspicion. Socrates himself had been a close associate of a man named Alcibiades, probably the most prominent Athenian in the generation after Pericles. Alcibiades was the man who engineered the disastrous Sicilian expedition and later ended his life as a defector going to Sparta.
Oh, great name, not a great guy.
His complex relationship with Socrates is, by the way, recounted in the drunken speech that Alcibiades gives in Plato's Dialogue Symposium. So you can see that the trial of Socrates, the little speech that you have read, takes place in the shadow of military defeat, of resistance, of conspiracy, and betrayal. Socrates was 70 years old at the time of the trial. So this was a highly charged political environment, far more volatile than, for example, the kind of partisan quarrels we see today in our republic. I hope. Yeah. Okay? So let me talk about the accusations. Let me move from the political context of the speech to the accusations. And I say accusations because there are, as you read, if you read closely, you will see there were actually 2 sets of accusations leveled against Socrates. Early in the speech, Socrates claims that his current accusers, Anytus and Meletus, again, the democratic resistance fighters, have brought charges against, the charges they have brought against him are themselves the descendants of an earlier generation of accusers who were responsible for, he claims, maligning and creating an unfavorable prejudice against Socrates.
Aristophanes.
These charges are not new, he tells the jury, and many members of the jury, he says, will have had formed an unfavorable opinion about him. This was the day before there were intense forms of jury selection where they would ask people, do you have a view of the case? Many of the jurors would have known Socrates.
Oh yeah, we're going by a lot, by the way. This is an Athenian trial by a lot. So you have to be, I believe you have to be a male voting age citizen, and then anyone out of that like 10,000 person pool will get put in the jury. So yeah, like your friends and your enemies can be on the trial. And yeah, if you speak at the polis, you will have friends and enemies. It's really interesting that the jury is this way, isn't it? What a crazy, fascinating state. I could talk about this and think about this for hours, man. How do they do it?
Certainly would have heard of him, and he says would have had already an unfavorable opinion formed about him by this earlier generation of accusers. Reference he makes to a comic poet. Yes, a comic poet. An unequivocal reference to the playwright Aristophanes, whose name I've had put up on the board. Aristophanes is the one who
Where'd you go?
created the original or the initial
That's right.
prejudice against Socrates. What was that prejudice that Aristophanes, this comic poet, had created?
This play called Clouds.
The allusion to Aristophanes and the comic poet is a part of what Plato calls in Book 10 of the Republic, the old quarrel between philosophy and poetry. This quarrel is a staple.
Interesting that the Greeks consider those two things opposed and we don't. Just a quick little side note.
Of Plato's dialogues.
Socrates is no fan of the poets, as you can see. You think that they know nothing. Stop. You did
It is a central
No applause. Marvelous. No damage. Achievements. Some taxes, but that's okay. We're at level 5. We're an enthusiast now. Alright, distance. I think distance again. Perfect. Yeah, well, I don't want to purchase any of this stuff yet. Like, I want at least like 50 grand before. Oh, we actually do have 50 grand. And 7 days we made 50 grand. We're making a lot more than 3 grand a day. And I like I said, we want to get at least into level 8 until we can buy a truck. Because I only want to buy a truck that we want. And how much is that Volvo one that we were looking at? They're just tuning in everybody. Yeah, level 8. Let's wait till we get to level 8. Keep rolling. I want to do like international trips. Like I don't like this. I don't like these. Oh, here we go. 1892. This is a big one. Yeah, 5 hours. Oh wait, no. Offer expires in 5 hours. Oh, what's the star mean? Oh, it's high value cargo. Ah. Oh, standard delivery. And what is this type? Articulated. Oh, so like those are the doubles. Ah, fascinating. And you can see what kind of truck we're driving. Cool. If we actually read these, it makes it a little bit easier. 1892 versus 18. Yeah, let's just do this one. Oh, how much time's left in the lecture? Yeah, we should have. It's really weird, actually, that we've totally been able to finish our lecture at the same time we finish the jobs. Like, the past 2 times I recorded the show. Yeah, let's wait till we get out of the town. Ooh, this is a nice thing, correct? Ooh, what are we carrying? What do you call that thing? Where'd that? Oh, a bulldozer. Where did I point up at? The lights on as well. Oh yeah, this truck is much better lights than the last one. Right turn here. Marvelous. Another right turn here. Ooh, dignified signal light. Also quite irritating. Okay, watch out for the sign. Perfect. Another stop sign. We'll have a 3 stop sign rule. Perfect. Oh, this thing's heavy. Maybe. What's that? What?
central theme
Oh, we might not have enough gas. We'll be fine.
not only of the symposium, in which Aristophanes and Socrates are actually shown at the same dinner table with one another, but it is also a key feature of the Republic, which we will be reading in a week, where Socrates offers an elaborate proposal for the censorship and control of poetry if it is to be made compatible with the demands of political justice.
Yep.
In
What
fact,
weirdo.
in a way, you
Socrates is not at all in favor of free speech, by the way, at least if you listen to how Plato writes in the Republic. He thinks that the people aren't qualified to know or determine what is true, and that they need to listen to, like, state-appointed myth makers that tell them the history and their origins and what is right and what is wrong.
cannot understand the Republic unless you understand the poetic backdrop to it and Socrates' long-standing engagement with the poetic tradition. And this back and forth between himself and the man he calls this comic poet. The core of this quarrel between the philosopher and the poet, between Socrates and Aristophanes, it's not just an aesthetic judgment, or it is not simply an aesthetic quarrel. It is, again, deeply political, or at least has something very political about it. It gets to the essence of the question of who is best equipped to educate future generations of citizens and civic leaders. Are the philosophers or are the poets, you might say, the true legislators for mankind? If you want to use Shelley's favorite, Shelley's dictum. Which one legislates for mankind? At the time of Socrates, has something very judgment, or it is not simply an aesthetic quarrel. It is, again, deeply political, or at least has something very political about it. It gets to the essence of the question of who is best equipped to educate future generations of citizens and civic leaders. Are the philosophers or are the poets, you might say, the true legislators for mankind? If you want to use Shelley's favorite, Shelley's dictum. Which one legislates for mankind? At the time of Socrates, the Greeks already had a centuries-long tradition of poetic education.
So, like, what would you make, like a Homeric argument?
Going back centuries to the time of Homer and Hesiod, that set out certain exemplary models of heroic virtue and civic life.
That's how I say it.
The Homeric epics were to the Greek world what the Bible is to our world. That is to say, in some respects, the ultimate authority regarding the way of the gods, the relation to the world, and the type of virtues appropriate to human beings. The virtues endorsed by the poetic tradition, of which Aristophanes is the great representative here, the great inheritor and representative. The virtues of this tradition were the virtues of a warrior culture, of a people, of warlike peoples and men at war. These were the qualities that had guided the Greeks for centuries and contributed to their rise to power. It contributed to Athens as well as Sparta's rise to greatness from a small, dispersed people to a great world power, and again allowed them to achieve a level of artistic, intellectual, and political accomplishment akin to Renaissance Florence, Elizabethan England, and Goethe's Weimar. So what is at stake in this quarrel between Socrates and the poets, between Socrates and the poetic tradition that he alludes to? First, Socrates' manner of teaching is markedly different from the poets, right? Does anyone know here the opening line of the Iliad, Homer's Iliad? Does anyone know the first line? Anyone remember that from high school? What? Well, right. Right. I mean, sing, goddess, the wrath of Achilles. Right?
Great opening.
Sing, goddess, the wrath of Achilles. The poets are oracular, right? They call on gods and goddesses to inspire them with song, to fill them with inspiration, to tell stories of people with superhuman strength and courage and anger. Okay? By contrast, you could say, the method of Socrates is not oracular. It is not storytelling. It is conversational. It is argumentative, if you want to use the word he applies to it. It is dialectical. Socrates makes arguments, and he wants others to engage with him to discover which argument can best withstand the test of rational scrutiny and debate. There are no arguments in Homer's Iliad or Odyssey. You hear strong and compelling stories, no arguments. Socrates makes, in other words, continual questioning and not the telling of stories and the recitation of verses, the essence of this new political education. He questions the methods of teaching of the poets. But secondly, again, Homer and the poets sing the virtues of men at war. Socrates wants to replace the warrior citizen with a new kind of citizen, a whole new set, you might say, of citizen virtues. The new Socratic citizen, let's call him that for a moment. The new Socratic citizen may have some features in common with the older Homeric warrior, but Socrates ultimately wants to replace military combat with a new kind of, you might say, call it verbal facility, verbal combat, in which, again, the person with the best argument is declared to be victorious. The person with the best argument. Let the best argument prevail. A famed Socratic method of argumentation is basically all that remains of the older pre-Socratic culture of struggle and combat. The new Socratic citizen is to be trained in the art of argument and dialectic, and we will talk a little later about what that means. So, it is as a challenge, or as a challenger to the poets and all they stand for, the century-long tradition of poetic education, that Socrates asserts himself, that Socrates presents himself. The Apology shows Socrates as offering a new model of citizenship, a new kind of citizen.
Right on the money here, by the way. Socrates' philosophical view against Athens is he's challenging the entire ideology and cultural worldview of the city, saying that I am not a bad guy. You should all be like me. I pursue rationality and truth and only what I can find for myself, and you people listen to people who don't know what they're talking about. And you should listen to me, and you should reward me.
His challenge to the poets is, in a way, the basis for the resentment that has built up against him, and that Aristophanes and what he calls the earlier accusers have brought to bear. In fact, you might say, so seriously was Socrates taken by Aristophanes and the poets that Aristophanes devoted an entire play. He wrote an entire play about Socrates called The Clouds. The Clouds, right? Devoted to debunking and ridicule Socrates' profession of learning. Aristophanes' play, sometimes it's even included in certain editions of the book you're reading, like this one. It has the edition of the Aristophanes' Clouds in it, along with the Apology and Crito.
Very interesting read.
The existence of that play shows to all of us just how seriously Socrates was taken by the greatest of his contemporaries, and Aristophanes was, along with Sophocles and Euripides and others, among the greatest of the Greek playwrights. The mockery, you might say, mockery of Socrates remains one of the sincerest forms of flattery. They took him very seriously. Let me just say something about The Clouds, this comic play, this satire on Socrates, because it is part of that initial accusation that Socrates says is leveled against him. Here, Aristophanes presents Socrates as an investigator, and this is part of the first charge, remember, an investigator of the things aloft and the things under the earth, and who makes the weaker argument the stronger. That's the argument that Socrates says Aristophanes brought about, brings against him. In this play, Socrates is presented as the head, the leader, the director.
Honestly, I'm kind of disappointed a little bit by this lecture. He only has 45 minutes, like I said, and like the first time I learned about this speech, well, not learned, the first time I heard this speech discussed, we had 3 hours to do it, but yeah, he's brushing over a lot. Let's see that one more time.
as an investigator, and this is part of the first charge, remember, an investigator of the things aloft and the things under the earth, and who makes the weaker argument the stronger.
So this is part of corrupting the youth. So yeah, he's accusing him of studying a bunch of stuff that he doesn't know about, like astronomy and geography, and making the weaker species stronger is pretty much like deliberately trying to make weaker arguments stronger. So basically spreading misinformation.
That's the argument that Socrates says Aristophanes brought about, brings against him. In this play, Socrates is presented as the head.
It's kind of like a caricature. It's Aristophanes' accusation, I know, it's kind of a caricature of Socrates going around questioning everything. Aristophanes is trying to say, I know I haven't read clouds in a long time, is trying to say that Socrates' interrogation of people is not science-based or rationality-based, but instead like musically based.
The leader, the director of what we might think of as the first think tank in human history. It's called in the play itself the Frontisterion, which means, or is sometimes translated as the thinkery, or the thinkateria, or simply a kind of think tank, where fathers, Athenian fathers, bring their sons to be indoctrinated into the mysteries of Socratic wisdom. And in the play, Socrates is shown hovering, flying above the stage in a basket in order better to be able to observe the clouds, the things aloft, right? But also in many ways symbolizing Socrates' at least on the Aristophanes account, Socrates' detachment from the things down here on earth, the thing that concern his fellow citizens. Socrates is a kind of what in German people will call a Luftmensch. He's a man up in the air, you know, kind of. He's so detached. He doesn't have his feet on the ground. And Socrates is shown not only mocking the gods in doing this, but he is shown by Aristophanes to teach incest and to teach all of the things that violate every decent human, taboo. Incest, the beating of one's parents, all these kinds of things. Socrates is presented as a kind of corrosive skepticism, which is at the core of Aristophanes' charge against him. To make a long story short, the play concludes with Socrates' think tank being burned to the ground by a disgruntled disciple.
Oh, yeah.
An object lesson for all later professors, I would say, who teach nonsense.
Like this guy.
Right.
He's funny.
Don't get any ideas.
He's funny. You guys like a historian's wit.
Take a match to the department. Yeah. So, how accurate is that picture of Socrates, the man who investigates the things aloft and the things under the ground? The Clouds was written in 423 when Socrates was in his mid-40s. And the Aristophanic Socrates is essentially we call a natural philosopher, again, investigating the things aloft, under the ground. He is what we would call today a scientist, a natural scientist. But this seems quite removed, doesn't it, from the Socrates who was brought up on charges of corrupting the young and impiety in the Apology. And here is where Socrates actually tells a story, very important in the course of this speech. He provides a kind of intellectual biography
We're still at the start
of an incident that occurred long before the trial and set him on a very different path. He recalls the story, don't you remember, of a man named Chaerephon, a friend of his, who had gone to the Delphic oracle, who had gone to the oracle at Delphi and asked if there was anyone wiser than Socrates, and was told there was not. Socrates tells us that when he was told this, he expressed disbelief in the oracle. He didn't believe it. And in order to disprove the oracle statement, he says he began a lifelong quest to find someone wiser than himself, a
Myra, no,
quest
what?
that in the course of
Because of
which
French, eh?
led him to interrogate the politicians, the poets, the craftsmen, all people of reputed to be knowledgeable. And his conversations led him to ask questions, not about, as we would say, natural scientific phenomena, but questions about the virtues, as he tells us, the virtues of a human being and a citizen, what we would call today perhaps moral and political questions. That incident that Socrates tells here is or represents what one could call the famous Socratic turn. Socrates' second sailing, so to speak. It represents the moment in the life of Socrates where he turns away from the investigation of natural phenomena to the study of the human and political things, the moral and political things. The Delphic story, for what it's worth, marks a major turning point in Socrates' intellectual biography. The move from the younger, we could call him Aristophanic Socrates, the Socrates who, again, investigates the things aloft and under the earth, to...
Time left in the lecture? Oh yeah, we're almost done. Actually, do we have time for one? No, only in 10 minutes. We'll do a short job. $60,000! Oh, I didn't see how close we were to level 6. Looks like it's going to take us another episode to get to level 8. Ooh, $20,000. Whoa. We gotta do this one. Oh, we gotta do this one. It'll be our first international trip. From Amsterdam to Munich. And for $20,000. Standard delivery, high value card. I feel like we have to do this one. What will we listen to after the lecture, though? Also, you'd be going for around an hour. Like, this would honestly be a fine time to stop. We could go to the next one, although I haven't read Crito. Should we finish the lecture and then just do it anyway? Chat? Not that anyone's tuned in, you brats. I think we have to do this one. Maybe we can save in the middle of our drive. Ooh, channel one. Oh, and we're in Ascania, so we're gonna get there quickly. Ship up and... Ooh, Amsterdam's actually... Wow! This is like the nicest looking town I've ever seen in this game. Okay, let's just go hard left. Perfect. Skinny little trailer outside this big ass gate. Thank you. Oh! Oh! Yeah, that guy is still not yielding. What are you doing, dude? Yeah, let's go. That was close. Woo, that was close. Oh, and we're definitely gonna need gas. Let's honestly just get gas here. I wonder what we're gonna listen to after. Like, I could just put anything I want at the top right. I think we'll just save after 10 minutes. Maybe we'll come back if I can pick something. Then I think we'll take a little bit of a break, and then we'll play Rome 2 for 3 hours. Then we'll get back to it. I'll have made back the time. I try and stream 1 to 2 hours a day, though I didn't the past 2 days, which is why I owe you. Not that it does very much for me, actually. The past 2 days, I think I gained 1 follower, but it was just one of my friends. But also, yeah, I wouldn't ask you to watch the other 2 videos I made on this because of the computer sounds and the terrible audio things. Is this a gas station? I think it's a service station. It's kind of like gas, though. Whatever. Places to be. What are you even carrying? Are these like low things? They kind of look like. no yielding. Bam. Very well executed turn. And let's wrap up the lecture.
To the later what we could call Platonic Socrates, the founder of political science. Socrates, the founder of our discipline, who asks about the virtues of moral and political life. Socrates' account of this turn, this major turn in his life and career, leaves a lot of questions unanswered that maybe even occurred to you as you were reading this dialogue, reading this speech. Why does he turn away from the investigation of natural phenomena to the study of human and political things? The Delphic oracle is interpreted by Socrates, at least, to command engaging with others in philosophical conversation. Why does he interpret it this way? Why does this seem the proper interpretation to engage in these kinds of conversations? It is this Socrates who is brought up on charges of corruption and impiety, and yet none of this quite answers the question, what is the nature of Socrates' crime? What did he do? What did corruption and impiety mean? To try to answer those questions, we would have to look a little bit at what Socrates means, or what is meant by this new.
When we're done this lecture, we're literally just going to listen to the Apology of Socrates. I've never found a version of it on YouTube because I've never looked. I guarantee there is one. And yeah, honestly, this is ridiculously arrogant. But I had much higher expectations for the lecture. We're not even like halfway done. We're not even halfway done Socrates' account. We're not even halfway done Socrates' account of the first third of the speech. So yeah, I think we need to apply a little bit more depth here. I have listened to the most of it, if not all of the multi-part series of these lectures, except for the Republic, and they are much better than the single part. Yeah, I would honestly say that this guy probably should have spent 2 or 3 lectures on this.
Kind of Socratic citizen. Who is this citizen? The charges brought against Socrates by Anytus and Meletus, we see, are not the same exactly as those brought against him by Aristophanes, the comic poet. Anytus and Meletus talk about impiety and corruption, not investigating the things aloft and making the weaker argument the stronger. What do these terms mean, impiety and corruption? In what sense are these civic offenses? What could impiety have meant to his audience and his contemporary? At a minimum, we would think the charge of impiety suggests disrespect of the gods. Impiety need not be the same thing as atheism, although Meletus confuses the two, but it does suggest irreverence, even blasphemy, toward the things that a society cares most deeply about. Yes? To be impious is to disrespect those things a person or a society cares most deeply about. When people today, for example, refer to flag burning as a desecration, as desecrating the flag, they are speaking the language of impiety, right? They are speaking the language of some kind of religious or quasi-religious desecration. Meletus, whose name in Greek actually means care, accuses Socrates of not caring properly for the things that his fellow citizens care about. So the question is, what does Socrates care about? What does he care about? Consider the following.
It's about as pretty as the game gets, folks.
Every society, which we know, operates within the medium of belief or faith of some kind. Take our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. All men are created equal, that we are endowed with inalienable rights, that all government, legitimate government, grows out of consent, and the like. These beliefs form something like a kind of national creed, you might say, American national creed, what it means to be an American and not someone else. Yet how many people could give a kind of reasoned account of what makes these beliefs true, of what grounds these beliefs? Most of us, most of the time, hold these beliefs as a matter of faith, as a matter of belief. We have learned about them because we have learned about them from childhood, because they were written by Thomas Jefferson or some other reputed high authority. To question those beliefs would seem to exhibit a kind of lack of civic faith, faith in our ruling opinions. In short, you might say a lack of civic piety or respect.
Pretty sure you guys know that I don't agree with this. I'm also pretty sure you know that he doesn't agree with this, at least the way he's putting it. But I believe he's talking about questioning American values this way to frame them against questioning Athenian values, which Socrates will do ceaselessly from now on in this speech.
Socrates clearly believes that piety or faith is the natural condition of the citizen. Every society, no matter of what kind, requires a kind of faith in its ruling principles, in its fundamental beliefs. But belief seems to be threatened from at least two sources. One is simple disbelief or unbelief, a kind of just sort of rejection of ruling opinion simply because you don't like it of some kind. You know, when you see the bumper sticker on the car, question authority, just kind of rejection of ruling opinion. But the other source of conflict with ruling opinion is from philosophy. Philosophy is not the same thing as simple disbelief or rejection, but the two can be easily confused. Philosophy grows out of a desire to replace opinion with knowledge, opinion or belief with reason. For philosophy, it is not enough simply to hold a belief on faith, but one must be able to give a rational account, a reasoned account for one's belief. Its goal, again, is to replace civic faith with rational knowledge. And therefore, philosophy is necessarily at odds with belief and with this kind of civic faith. The citizen may accept certain beliefs on faith because he or she is attached to a particular kind of political order or regime. But for the philosopher, this is never enough. The philosopher seeks to judge those beliefs in the light of true standards, in the light of what is always and everywhere true. As a quest for knowledge, there is a necessary and inevitable tension between philosophy and belief, or to put it another way, between philosophy and the civic pieties that hold the city together. From this point of view, I want to say, Socrates, we could ask, was Socrates guilty of impiety? On the face of it, the answer to that seems yes. Socrates does not care about the same thing his fellow citizens care about. His opening words to the jury seem to convey this. I, he says, am simply foreign to the manner of speech here. This seems to be a statement of his alienation or disaffection from the concerns of his fellow Athenians. I know nothing about what you do or what you care about. Yet it certainly doesn't seem right to say that Socrates does not care at all. He claims to care deeply, perhaps more deeply than anyone has ever cared around him, before or since. And among the things he cares deeply about, he says, is this calling to do nothing, as he says, to do nothing but persuade you, both younger and older, not to care for bodies and money, but how your soul will be in the best possible condition. That concern with the state of one's soul, he tells the jury, has led him not only to impoverish himself, but to turn himself away from the public business, from the things that concern the city, to the pursuit of...
This is what I'm talking about earlier when I say that what makes this speech so interesting is Socrates' audacity and his consistency is it's literally true that he's this poor guy with like 2 kids, like with no freaking shirt on his back pretty much, who spends all his time going around asking people questions about their lives to see if they truly know what they're talking about. It's literally how he defines his life's purpose. And he's like, I'm doing a public service to everybody. You're welcome.
Of private virtue. And here are the words of his that I want to leave you with today from section 31D of the Apology. Socrates writes, "This is what opposes my political activity, and its opposition seems to me to be altogether noble. For know well, men of Athens, if I had long ago attempted to be politically active, I would long ago have perished, and I would have benefited neither you nor myself. Now, do not be vexed with me when I speak the truth. For there is no human being who will preserve his life if he genuinely opposes either you or any other multitude and prevents many unjust and unlawful things from happening in the city. Rather, he says, if someone who really fights for justice is going to preserve himself, even for a short time, it is necessary for him to lead a private rather than a public life." Think about that. If someone who really fights for justice is going to preserve himself, it is necessary for him to lead a private, not a public life. How are we to understand Socrates' his claim that the pursuit of justice requires him to turn away from public to private life? What is this new kind of citizen, again, concerned with this kind of private virtue, this concern for the virtue of one's soul? That's the question I want us to consider again for next week as we finish the apology and move our way up to the Crito. Okay? We'll do that for next week.
Interesting. Okay, we're not done with the apology. We're gonna continue with it with Crito. Okay, let's take a look at that really quickly. Yeah, see, the first half of this is going to be on the apology. Okay. This makes much more sense. Yeah, because I was really about to actually say that I was really disappointed and I was about to actually apologize that our first political philosophy lecture was one that ended up being so insufficient, at least in my opinion. Yeah, this text is so much deeper and so much crazier. We're not even getting to the start of it. So, yeah, I'm excited to see what I get to write about it. I thought that this guy was going to blow me out of the water, and I mean, he still has 25 minutes to blow me out of the water, but yeah, I think I can do a lot better job. But thankfully, we're not actually done. We can get right back into this and continue our drive. Awesome. And I'm not sure I said it. I think I did. Yeah, we were just going to listen to the apology instead, and I was going to go through it myself and commentate it for you, but now we can finish this, guys. And hell, maybe we will listen to the apology, although we're not going to do that for any of the other ones except for maybe Credit, because the apology is only 30 pages, right? You can really read. I'm not sure you can read 2 hours, but it's kind of a dense read. Also, there's lots of footnotes, but you could read it in a day for sure. Unlike a lot of the other books that we're going to be looking at. All right, yeah, let's just get back to driving and make sure that this plays.
Okay, I want to begin with a question today. I have a question for you. You've been reading the apology. You've read the apology and the Crito. Have had a little chance to think about these works. I'd just like to do a piece of survey research. How many of you, just show of hands is all I need, how many of you believe Socrates is innocent and should be acquitted?
I'm not voting for acquittal. I like Socrates. He's a very interesting guy. This is not a good defense speech, which we will get into. I guess in my essay, he's totally guilty.
Okay. And how many of you believe he is guilty and more or less got what he deserved?
Oh, he's guilty. I don't know if he got what he deserved.
Higher, please.
Oh, sorry, Professor.
Okay. Not exactly the same proportion, I think. Somewhat a greater number believe in his innocence than in the Athenian jury, obviously. But let me just ask you in the brown shirt, just curious, why do you think he is innocent and should be acquitted?
Well, he should not be acquitted.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, if you want to ask yourself the larger question of is what Socrates does wrong for the city and make it worse, I think the answer to that question is probably no. But is Socrates guilty of violating the laws as he and Miletus defined them in his speech? Pretty much 100%. So, yeah, I don't think Socrates makes Athens worse. It's very clear that he makes it better. He makes it a hell of a lot more interesting, to say the least. But also, like, if you watch and listen to the speech, like, Socrates lays out that, like, his philosophy of life and what he advocates for is existentially opposed to the life of Athens and the gods of Athens, which means that, yeah, he's arguing for impiety, which means that he's violating the law, which means that he's guilty.
Yeah.
It seemed to me that the accusations were brought against him were based more on personal grievances and grudges as politics and impact sometimes oftentimes and not exactly by concrete charges.
Okay. And I noticed you had your yes. Why did you believe he was guilty and got what he deserved?
Like I said, I don't think Socrates deserved to die for his crimes, but he definitely made it hard. He definitely made it hard to vote for any other punishment. Damn. That's our first speaker ticket of our very long journey.
I think I'm agreeing that what is just isn't some abstract definition. What is just is what society agrees. And I mean, he was going
It's a shame you can't hear them.
who had the authority to
Mhm.
define where it's like, in cases of what is just is whatever society says is just, and society says not just.
Okay.
You wonder what the Yale undergraduates have to say about the apology, or at least I do.
Okay. So, as Lincoln once said, both of you can't be right. Neither of you may be right, but both of you can't be right. So, this is a question that I want to continue today to consider what the trial of Socrates means, and I want to begin by going back to a problem or a paradox that I ended the class with last time. That is to say, that Socrates proposes, a new conception of what it is to be a citizen. He opposes, we have seen, the traditional, you might say, Homeric conception of the citizen, certain notions of citizen loyalty and patriotism, created, shaped by the poetic tradition going back to Homer. He wants to replace it with a new kind of, I want to call it rational citizenship, philosophical citizenship, a view of citizenship that, again, relies on one's own powers of independent reason and judgment. And in the course of defending this point of view, Socrates says in an interesting passage that he has spent his entire life pursuing private matters rather than public ones, and has deliberately avoided public issues of politics. And that raises a question: how can a citizen? How can this new kind of citizenship that he is proposing, how can any kind of citizenship be devoted just to private matters and not public? Citizenship seems to require even the public sphere, the public realm. What does Socrates mean when he says his way of life has been devoted almost exclusively to private rather than to public matters? Well, the first thing we might think about is whether that's entirely true, whether he's being entirely candid with his audience. After all, the kind of investigations, the kind of interrogations that he has been pursuing since going to the Delphic oracle and then following at least his interpretation of its mandate. These investigations of the politicians, the poets, the craftsmen, and the like, he says, these have been carried out in public. He has gone around in the market and in the open and in the public forum, questioning and interrogating and obviously making a variety of people look foolish. So this is hardly simply a private question or a private way of life. But perhaps he means simply that by pursuing a private life, that again he's going to rely almost exclusively on his own individual powers of reason and judgment, not to defer or rely on such public goods as custom, as authority, as tradition, things of this sort. But I think Socrates means more than that, more than simply he wishes to rely on the powers of private, individual judgment. When he says that his way of life has been private, he means that he has pursued a policy of let's call it, principled abstinence from public life. Socrates is a great abstainer. He has abstained from participation in the collective actions of the city, actions that he believes could only entail complicity in acts of public injustice. His own motto, if you want to ascribe him a motto, seems to be a variety of the Hippocratic Oath, the doctor's famous oath, do no harm.
Interesting.
And to do no harm, he has required of himself a kind of principal abstention from public life. If George Bush described himself not long ago as the decider, we might call Socrates the abstainer. Well, what does he mean by, or what do I mean by referring to his policies of abstention from political life? Do you remember? He gives a couple of examples of examples of this sort. One of them, remember, concerned his refusal to join in the judgment to condemn and execute the 10 Athenian generals who had failed to collect the corpses, the bodies of the men lost in a particular battle during the Peloponnesian War. This was a mark of great shame and disgrace. The generals were an actual event. There was a kind of judgment of collective guilt, and they were all executed. The leaders, the generals of this particular battle. And Socrates tells how he refused to engage.
If you don't give, I believe if you don't give Greek proper burial rites or proper funeral rites, they don't get to go to the afterlife. So it's a super big deal for Athenians to not have funeral rites. It's like if you die at sea, they believe that you never ever get to go to the afterlife and you are dead forever.
In that kind of to join the court in the judgment of their collective guilt. A true incident. In the second story, you remember from your reading of the book, was his reminding the jury how he refused to participate. He was ordered by the 30, the hated tyranny of the 30. He was ordered to assist in the arrest of a man known as Leon of Salamis, an arrest that would have and did in fact lead to Leon's execution. And Socrates tells how he, at considerable risk to himself, refused to participate in the arrest of this man. In both of these cases, I take it Socrates' point is that his own individual moral integrity stands as a kind of litmus test, you might say, for whether to engage or disengage from political life. I was the sort of man, he tells the jury, I was the sort of man who never conceded anything to anyone contrary to what is just. No doubt also reminding them of his.
This is an interesting argument that Socrates is presenting, and actually I did see it this way the first time I read it, but yeah, Socrates is sort of trying to make an argument that he was morally justified to violate the laws of Athens in this case, but it's not really applicable here because Socrates violated the laws of the tyrants and not the laws of the Athenian assembly, which he did in this case. So if it was morally justified for him to violate the laws of the tyrants, it doesn't necessarily mean it's morally justified. Probably not that. He's not morally justified to violate the laws of the Athenian assembly, but an interesting argument. Like I said, I'm quite certain that Socrates should be ruled guilty.
His refusal to bow to the 30 tyrants in the case of Leon of Salamis. But this raises, I think, the central or
How long did the 30 tyrants rule Athens? We're gonna Google it really quickly. Shithead. How long did the 30 tyrants rule Athens? 8 months? I said 3 years. Imagine losing 5% of your entire population, Athens, for the record, to only rule 8 months. Brutal. What a futile end.
or a central point about Socratic citizenship, or Socrates' view of citizenship. This kind of principled disobedience to the law, something like Thoreau's model of civil disobedience. Does this policy of principled disobedience, you might say, vindicate or indict Socrates of the charge of corruption and impiety that has been brought against him? Can a citizen, he affirms, I will ask though, can a citizen put his own conscience above the law, as Socrates seems to do? This is a problem that we will see considerably later in the term that vexes a very important political thinker by the name of Hobbes, about whether an individual can somehow put their own sense of conscience or moral integrity even above the law. What would a community...
That's something I haven't looked at yet, by the way, Hobbes. I tried to read the Leviathan 3 times and bounced off of it hard all 3 times, but the 4th time will be the charm, and it will be on this series. And I would like to write an essay about why you should read the Leviathan, so it's going to be a pretty tall order.
Of Socratic citizens look like, each one picking and choosing, you might say, the laws or the rules to obey or to follow or not to follow. Socrates is so concerned, it seems, with his individual, his private moral integrity, that he says, in a sense, to the city of Athens, to the court, to the Athens, to the assembly or the courts, that he will not dirty his hands with public life. And again, this is a question that we will see later on that Machiavelli takes very seriously, the question of whether or not politics, political life, requires one to dirty one's hands in the world. What kind of citizen is he or she who abstains from, maybe even rejects, the harsh necessities, requirements of political life? Socrates seems to be, in some respects, an example of what Hegel in the 19th century described as a beautiful soul. You know, someone who, and he used that term ironically.
Pork house? That cannot be the name of a place. Does that mean, but that's gotta be like parking lot or something, right? Park house? Is that how they, I have no idea. That can't be the name of the place.
I should say. Someone who puts their own private moral incorruptibility above all else. And we all probably know or have read about people like this. How does Socrates answer these charges? He in a way, being not just an abstainer, but again, putting his own private moral conscience or integrity over and above the law. And he tries to defend his point of view by arguing in a famous passage that his policy of abstinence actually carries important benefits to the city. He brings with it important benefits. And in the passage that I'm referring to, he defines himself as a gadfly. Everyone will remember that. The gadfly who improves the quality of life in the city. In section 30d, Socrates writes, let me read the passage. "So I, men of Athens, are now too far from making a defense speech on my own behalf. I do it rather," he says, "on your behalf. What I say for you," he appears to say, "so that you do not do something wrong concerning the gift of the God referring to himself, the gift of the god by voting to condemn me. For if you kill me, he continues, you will not easily discover another of my sort, who, even if it is rather ridiculous to say so, has simply been set upon the city by the god as though upon a great and well-born horse, who is rather sluggish because of his great size and needs to be awakened by some gadfly. Just so, in fact, the god seems to me to have set me upon the city as some one of this sort. I awaken and persuade and reproach each one of you, and I do not stop settling down everywhere upon you the whole day.
I am not a corrupter. I am a public servant. Thank you very much. I wake you people up to the world, and you should warn me.
So here we have the example of Socrates telling us, not only declaring himself to be the gift of the god who is brought for this, but that he is a...
Also, keep in mind that the Athenians are, pan-Hellenic, polytheistic people. Now, what Socrates means when he refers to the god is kind of open to a pretty wide interpretation. I believe, and I can't remember where I can back this up, but I think that the best way to describe what Socrates believes in is more of a great mover than a pantheon. But yeah, he's just totally willing to, during his charge of impiety, mention the god multiple times, and then declare that he is a divine gift from the god.
He's a great...
What a legend! What a legend!
benefactor of the city, that his example of the man of individual moral conscience brings with it great, as it were, public benefits. It is not on his behalf, he tells the audience, but yours, his fellow citizens, that he does what he does. You may not like me, he says to the jury, but I am good for you. And furthermore, he claims in this, what can only be described as sort of quasi-religious language, that he has no choice in the matter. This is not something he has chosen to do. He is, as he says, a gift from the god. He has been commanded, he argues, to do this. Men of Athens, he says, I will obey the god rather than you. And as long as I breathe and am able to do so, I will certainly not stop philosophizing.
Even if you kill me, even if you try to kill me, I'm not going to stop.
He seems to envelop himself and his way of life with a kind of religious imagery, the Delphic oracle, the gift of the god image. He envelops his conception of citizenship within this religious language. And this will or should lead any reader of the Apology and any reader of Plato to ask an important question about Socrates' use of this language. We will see it again in different ways in the Republic. Is he sincere in saying this and making this point, or is he somehow being ironical in his use of the religious tone?
Yeah, this is a good question, actually. Socrates really can't be a gadfly and a gift from the god at the same time. He can't be introducing a new lifestyle and worldview that will succeed the Homeric one that, defines all of Athens, and then also saying that I am a pest. They're contradictory. Also, you gotta see how Socrates is not defending himself from the charges and spending a lot of his time pontificating on why he is awesome and essential to the people of Athens, and not impious, and not corrupting the youth.
Or the religious register. He is, after all, on trial for his life for the charge of impiety. Would it not seem that in order to rebut the charge of impiety, that he would use or adopt a kind of religious language that would resonate with the jury and rebut the accusation, perhaps even suggesting that he is the truly religious and pious one and not the ones like Anytus and Meletus who are bringing charges against him. Socrates seems, or could be seen to be speaking not just ironically but provocatively in describing himself as a gift of the god. In a sense, you might ask, what could be more ludicrous?
Yeah, exactly. You might
Socrates
ask.
declaring himself, or anyone declaring themselves to be, a gift of the divine. But, right? I mean, who would make such a claim?
Only one man in all of
But
history.
in another,
Only one man. I mean, like, many people would, like Jesus and like many other people. But no one would like Socrates. No one says that I am a gift from God because I annoy people.
respect, he seems to take the divine calling very seriously, right? I mean,
Yeah, and he's also like, I can't live any other way because I've laid out my philosophy this way and I've demonstrated my philosophical consistency. I can't stop living this way, even if you kill me. This is how I want to go. In fact, it's pretty clear. Well, it's not clear. It is highly plausible. Oh, it's highly plausible that Socrates knew he was going to die and went to this trial anyway just to go out like a Chad and tell them how wrong they were. We're not going to bag it in. Just because he wanted to go out like a champ and go after his detractors and show them that they were wrong and that it would come back to bite them to challenge him in his way of thinking. And yeah, he was right about that, by the way. It did come back to bite them.
does he not? It was only when the Delphic oracle replied to Chaerephon, he tells that story, that it replied to him that no one was wiser than Socrates, that Socrates undertook this second sailing, as it were. His turn, we saw this last time, his turn away from the investigation of purely natural phenomena to the study of the world of moral virtue and justice. He repeatedly maintains that the path.
All right, 10 hours. Excellent. 850 kilometers. Big money. Big money. Awesome. Level 6.5. And yeah, we leveled up. I think we're just going to stick with this. No, do we want to do another long distance? I have fun on the long distance trips. And yes, 20% higher for 850 kilometers. Yeah, I think we're going to leave it at long distance 4 and then max out high value cargo. Yeah, I want deliveries up to 11. Yeah, over 1,000 kilometers. Alrighty, perfect. And yeah, now we have 80 grand. And let's see if we have any cool big jobs. Yeah, like we have another one right here. Perfect. I think and it's a double trailer. Alright, how much time is left in the lecture? Let's see if we have time for another job. We definitely don't. Definitely don't. We only have 7 more minutes. I think that's where we're gonna call it. Yeah, we went for an hour and 40 minutes, and just like last time, nobody tuned in. But I don't care. I'm doing this for me. I'm having fun. I hope you had a lot of fun. Thanks for tuning in, and I will be seeing you next time. We're gonna be coming back later this evening, maybe just after this afternoon, maybe just after a half-hour break, and we're gonna be playing 2 or 3 hours of some Rome 2, and conquering the Italian peninsula, picking up where we left off. Thanks so much for tuning in. And see you next time for Crowdown.